Hello, Internet. I am very drunk for this episode, but then again, it's my first episode. Time travel. It's a concept that sci fi writers love to play with, and usually it ends up making absolutely zero logical sense the second you think about it for more than 5 minutes. Enter Continuum, a 2012 Canadian sci fi series that looked at the concept of a dystopian future and asked, what if the protagonist was fighting to protect the evil corporations? Which is certainly a choice. So, let's talk about the pilot episode of Continuum. The year 2077. We open in the year 2077. The government's worlds have entirely collapsed and society is now ruled by the corporate Congress, which, given the current state of things, feels less like a distant sci-fi dystopia and more like a very realistic projection for next Tuesday. Our main character, Kiera Cameron, played by Rachel Nichols. Kiera is a protector, which is essentially a highly militarized police officer who has a very tight cat suit that's bronze colored that gives her a heads up display in her brain and lets her shoot people with electricity. She has a husband, a son, and absolutely zero moral qualms about enforcing a totalitarian corporate dictatorship. And didn't I mention I'm Swedish, so when I'm drunk, I might not get words 100% correctly. We are also introduced to our villains, Liber8. They are a group of freedom fighters / terrorists who blew up a building, killing 30,000 people in order to take down 20 people who are responsible for the corporations. And the show sets up an incredibly fascinating moral dilemma right away. Because on one hand, Liber8's manifesto about corporate greed destroying humanity is generally entirely correct. But on the other hand, they are murdering thousands of innocent people. So are they the bad guys? Well, mostly. Now on to the worst execution ever. Liber8's leaders are captured and sentenced to death. They are placed in a futuristic execution chamber that looks like a giant glowing tanning bed. Kiera is there doing crowd control because her main character contract requires her to be in the room, basically. But wait, it turns out that Liber8 smuggled a small metallic orb into the execution chamber. How did highly monitored domestic terrorists smuggle a complex piece of temporal technology into a maximum security execution chamber? Well, the show aggressively asks you not to worry about it. So long story short, they activate the orb, which isn't a bomb, but a time machine. The blast radius creates a temporal wormhole, and because Kiera Cameron happens to be standing slightly too close, she gets sucked in with them. Welcome to Vancouver, playing itself. Kiera and the terrorists are violently dumped into the year 2012, and in a shocking twist for a sci-fi television show, they are in Vancouver, but Vancouver is actually playing Vancouver, rather than pretending to be Seattle or New York or, basically groundbreaking stuff at this point. This is a first time for basically everybody. Kiera wakes up and realizes her brain chip communications are offline. She attempts to call her futuristic police dispatch, but instead, her signal gets picked up by a local server. Enter a very important character called Alec Sadler. Alec is a 17-year-old tech genius working out of his family's barn, so you know he's fucking important. He is essentially the 2012 version of Steve Jobs, if Steve Jobs wore flannel and spent all day hacking into radio frequencies. Because, of course, the only person who completely unreleased experimental tech can intercept a transmission from the year 2077 is a teenage boy in a barn. Alec becomes Kiera's guy in the chair, guiding her through 2012 and acting like a futuristic IT tech support. Meanwhile, Liber8 realizes they are in the past and immediately decide to alter history by doing what any group of advanced futuristic terrorists would do. They rob a police armory for guns. Kiera tracks them down using her super suit, which, by the way, can turn completely invisible. This is a thing in the future. She gets into a shootout with terrorists and ends up crossing paths with Detective Carlos Fanegra, played by Victor Webster. He's a semi-important character. Going forward, Carlos is your standard by-the-book 2012 detective who is very confused by the woman in the bronze wetsuit doing parkour and firing EMPs out of her hands. Because this is a sci-fi show on a basic cable channel in the 2010s, it cannot just be a serialized sci-fi epic. It has to be a police procedural element. So Kiera realizes she needs police resources to track down Liber8. She walks into the Vancouver Police Department, looks Carlos dead in the eyes, and lies, telling him she's a detective from Portland. Because, that makes everything believable. And Carlos, a seasoned detective, does 0 background checks. It seriously goes, sure, sounds legit. Want to be my partner? And that is basically the pilot of Continuum right there, folks. We end up with Kiera realizing she is trapped in the past. Her family is 65 years away into the future, and she has to team up with a teenage farm boy and a gullible detective who will believe anything to stop a group of time-traveling terrorists and preventing a corporate dystopia from ever existing. I know it's kind of hard to figure out who's the good guy and the bad guy in this one. Honestly, as goofy as some of the early 2010 CGI is, the premise is actually incredibly solid. The moral ambiguity of a protagonist who is fighting to preserve a fundamentally broken future is a generally fantastic concept that you rarely see on television. Man, you can tell I've had a lot of vodka. It sets up a really compelling chess game between Kiera and Liber8. But whether or not the show actually manages to stick the landing on that complex moral philosophy, well, guess what, folks? That's a whole different video.